So good morning, everyone. And perhaps here that getting ready for meditation, I'm already becoming quiet. And maybe if I look for words to say, I won't find any, but if I maybe just talk, maybe they'll come. One of the teachings, implications of Buddhism is that nothing that we see and touch and smell and hear, or say this way, everything that we see and touch and hear and smell and even think is made up of parts, is made up of other things, is a composite made up of things that have preceded, that led to it, conditions that led to it, and also are coming together of different elements, different other things. And those things are composite as well. And in that composite nature of these things, there are actually no things. There are only processes. Some things arise and persist for a while and then they pass. But one way or the other, all things are in process. And when we look at our inner life, our emotional life, our mental life, the things that we can know there, except for concepts, ideas give the semblance of nouns, of things, that this is the way it is. But all our emotions, our thoughts, our body sensations, everything that we can feel and experience and sense is made up of other parts. It's a composite. And in some way or other is in process and moving. And it's when we get caught in nouns, it's possible to be caught in nouns, and this is the way it is, that we get hung up, we get caught, we suffer, we leave the river of change, we leave the dynamism of a life made up of all the comings and goings of our life, the life around us, this dynamic interdependent process, interdependent arising of phenomena. So we sit to meditate in the middle of many, many things that make us up this moment. We are dynamic processes. Though our thinking might not think so. So assuming a meditation posture, and the posture you take is a composite made up of different parts of the body, assuming different positions. The body itself is composite, made up of bones and flesh and muscles and organs and nerves, skin, hair. And we take this composite body and assume a posture that promotes attentiveness to here and now. And then to gently close your eyes. One of the dynamic processes that's constantly shifting and changing. One of the important pieces of the whole. is our breathing. And to gently breathe more deeply, more fully, maybe 3/4 full. And a long exhale, settling in to the body. Exhaling and relaxing into the body. And letting the breathing return to normal. In ordinary life, part of the composite of who we are that contributes to the whole is the tension we have in our body, the holding patterns. We create a different whole when we begin to relax and let go the body. On the exhale, relaxing the muscles of the face. On the exhale, softening the shoulders. Softening the belly. And then to settle your attention into the body breathing, feeling the movements of the body as you breathe. And the experience we call breathing is a composite made up of other parts, other activities. It's made up of the inhale and the exhale. The movements of the body. The air going in and out through the nostrils. One way or other, the breathing is under the influence of, often under the influence of our mood or emotional state. Breathing is under the influence of the level of excitement in the body. Activation. Breathing is a little bit influenced by it, whatever degree of pleasure, comfort or discomfort that comes along with the experience of breathing. The experience of breathing is made up of the choices we make, the interests, the ideas we have about breathing and about how to notice breathing, where in the body to pay attention. And finally, part of the experience of breathing is the awareness of breathing itself. Without some awareness, there's no experiencing of breathing. And all these things, all these parts of the experience, I don't think we can very well control them or guide them or make them be just right. Perhaps you can surrender into the experience of breathing. Let it be what it is, a dynamic process made up of many parts that you can allow to operate as it does, and for you, just to be aware of it. And then as we come to the end of this sitting, one part of human life is what motivates us, the wishes we have. And of course there are many wishes, many motivations to be had. We end with a particular form of love, goodwill, friendliness, that is wishing well for others, being motivated to bring about the welfare and happiness of others. And may it be, as we end this meditation, that we spend these next 2 minutes reflecting and thinking about whatever motivation we have, whatever desire, wish we have, that others be well, that others be happy, safe. Our wishes for the welfare and happiness of everyone. May everyone be happy. May everyone be safe. May everyone be peaceful. May everyone be free. And may it be that each of us also has the wish to contribute to that. May it be that we contribute to the welfare and happiness of all beings. Thank you. So today I'll continue this 5-part series on getting wise to emotions, a wise relationship to them. And part of it is to realize that emotions are not a singular unitary thing, but they are composites. They are made up of the elements and pieces. And they're made up of elements in different ways. Different parts make up emotions in different ways. And maybe that's part of the reason why it's not so clear exactly what an emotion is. And we don't have to know exactly what an emotion is as a category. We might want to know what anger is, or we might want to know sadness, or happiness, or love. There's a whole range of these things that fit under the umbrella term of emotions. And whichever ones we fit in there, they are composites. They're made up of component parts. And why that's important is that sometimes people will have uh, attitudes, beliefs, relationships to emotions with the idea that it's a singular thing. Anger is anger, and it justifies things. It drives us. We have a relationship to anger as that it's good, it's bad. Um, but when we start kind of not looking at it only as a solid singular thing, but start seeing the component parts, then we can have relationship to the different parts, and the relationship to the whole becomes different. We might realize that some of the elements that can make up an emotion are actually more important, and perhaps more important for our motivations, for understanding, for our healing, for finding our freedom with it all. Sometimes it's hard to work with an emotion when we only see it as a singularity, as a solid thing in and of itself. And it can be kind of overwhelming. But once we can kind of drop down underneath the veneer, underneath the label or the general kind of solitary concept, we begin seeing it in a different way and have a whole different relationship to what's happening. So I'd like to offer you some of the things that make up emotions, and maybe you can think of some more as well. So part of an emotion is a bodily experience, a physiological shift and change that happens in the body when an emotion becomes present. For some people, the physiological change is very strong and clear. For some people, it's very quiet, and maybe even they would say there is no physiological change. But I think that emotion is always something, and the quieter we become, in meditation, for example, the more attuned we can be to even the subtlest changes of physiology as we have emotions. Activations of muscles, of energies, probably of hormones and biochemical things. That all this stuff begins to shift and change in the body as emotion arises, as it persists, and as it dissipates. Some of that physiological change might precede the actual arising of the emotion itself. We might have a lot of stress, and the stress hormones, the stress sensations, the tightness in their body is a condition for the arising of anger and or fear, and that the condition that precedes it in the body is often sometimes the way to heal it as well, because sometimes as the body relaxes and settles, then the fuel for the particular emotion is not being provided. The physiology sometimes drives the emotional lives. So dropping down into the body and really getting familiar with all the different bodily expressions of emotions, bodily manifestations of them, it can be very important. Another thing that makes up a good number of emotions is cognitive. And we might start with the stories that we have. It's a kind of a classic thing in meditation is to be relatively calm and peaceful and minding your own business with your breathing. And for some reason that is not obvious at all, your mind produces a thought from long ago of a person you knew, maybe a person who harmed you or hurt you or annoyed you. And just thinking about that story and what happened to that person, our physiology changes. The energy in the body that maybe goes from being centered in our torso and up into our head. Maybe the hands get tight, their jaws get tight, or you feel a contraction in the mind. And because the story still has a lot of juice, a lot of impact on us. And what's fascinating there is to see that the movement is from the story that arises to the story is a condition for the bodily manifestation. And the body was fine by itself, but then the story kind of evokes something very powerful, and then the bodily expression came. And when stories are part of emotions, then when if we are storytellers, telling and retelling the story, that can perpetuate the emotion. That can keep it going, can strengthen it, can influence very much the course of the emotion because of the nature of the storytelling. Sometimes the stories change as we tell it, and so then the emotions change as well. And we might have started off, for example, being angry, and we telling our story about how we've been, slighted by someone. And then we tell ourselves a story, well, if that person knows that I'm angry, they'll probably retaliate. And now I'm afraid, and now suddenly fear arises. And then we realize something with another story. Maybe we realize, oh, the person's actually moving to another continent, and has said never going to come back to this country. And then you say, you can feel yourself relax, and then there's a happiness that might arise. And so we tell ourselves stories, and the stories have meaning, associations. Another part of this component part of emotions that's sometimes more obvious with the story is that there's a self in a relationship to the emotion. Self-understanding, how we view ourselves, how we have other people see us, how we are personally affected by the story, the events, and what's going on, what emotions mean for me, what's going to happen if maybe I feel happy and I'm the one who's happy. I'm so happy that I'm happy, and this will be great. My life is made. I'm going to be happy forever, and there's a lot of I making and me making, and part of the happiness might be in relationship to I'm the one who's happy, and so the self-identification with the emotion and the role of I and self-understanding of who I am and how that's a component part of emotions as well. I'll talk more about that tomorrow. And there's also motivation that's part of the emotion. I talked about that a little bit with metta earlier, that emotion like loving kindness is one that has motivation built into it. It's wishing someone well, wanting them to be well, maybe wanting to support that to happen. If there is anger, there's a motivation perhaps to get rid of something, to push it away. And get angry with your computer and you throw it across the room to kind of get it away. There's some emotions come with motivations and intention. Wanting something to happen. And sometimes that's really helpful to notice what motivation comes along with an emotion. What motivation comes along with sadness, or what comes along with joy. Just noticing the shifts and changes. What's the motivation? What's the desire that's connected to it? Emotions are also connected to perceptions, and that's a little different than the stories, but overlaps with them. And that is what we think we're perceiving, the ideas we have about things, and there's an ancient Chinese story that's told, or vignette that's told, of a man who's in a sailboat going across a lake, big lake, and another sailboat comes along and unexpectedly bangs into his sailboat. And the person gets furious. And then he lifts up and looks over the edge of the boat and sees that there's no one in the other boat. It's just somehow gotten loose and it's floating around. And the anger was there, thinking there was a person in charge that they could be angry with. And then the person realized, well, you should always be attentive to what's floating around and paying attention. And we perceive things a lot differently when it's done by some other person versus if it's done by a natural phenomena. If some beautiful deer maybe walks across your garden, maybe you're upset, or maybe you've never seen a deer in your property that haven't been around for hundreds of miles, And you're like, rather than upset, you're just like amazed. Wow, there's a deer with its fawn, and the. But if a neighbor comes across and walks across your garden, maybe accidentally, there's that we perceive it differently and we interpret it differently. Are the perceptions we make the most useful perceptions? Are they optional? Are they particular interpretation of events? Maybe they're good perceptions, good interpretations, but to see it as that way. So these are some of the, I can go on further, but to spend some time looking at your emotions as they occur, at what is the physiology of it? What is the stories related to it? What are the motivations related to it? How are you as a person, as a self, your identity, your idea of yourself, how does that come into play? And what are the perceptions and ideas that operate when an emotion is there? And are they built into the fabric of the universe, that's the perception, the idea, the interpretation to have? Or are there others to be had? And there are others that are more maybe appropriate or more peaceful, and maybe there's a range of interpretations, and maybe they're all equally valuable, but why choose the one that's stressful for you? Maybe choose one that brings you a sense of awe and delight and joy. So what you might do this next 24 hours is take some time to sit down, maybe with a piece of paper, and kind of map out the different component parts that make up your emotion, and different ones you have, especially the ones that are live, but also you can review other ones you've had, and maybe lay them down on a piece of paper like a little mind map, or like a mandala of what they all are, and then consider the component parts themselves. What kind of permanence, what kind of solidity, what kind of art do they have? What kind of relationship do you have to the parts? And as you begin looking more carefully at the parts of an emotion, what happens to the emotion? Does the emotion shift and change in surveying the parts that make it up? So thank you, and I hope your emotional life is rich and valuable and supportive for you. And if it's not, I hope that this deeper investigation into it will be supportive. Thank you.